There's a recording. So my name is Ryan Burkhardt. I've included my information in the chat. So if you have any questions after this webinar, let us know. I will be sending out the PowerPoint as well as the recording. And then also throughout the session, as questions come up, feel free to ask during the Q&A and the chat session. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well today. It's raining here in Washington, D.C., so it's getting cold and rainy. Guess it's time for fall here. Thanks for everybody for joining. I know your time is very valuable, and I do appreciate you stopping by for a few minutes to talk about Checkpoint MDR. A couple things. I'm Dan Wiley. I'm the head of threat management here at Checkpoint. I'm also responsible for the day-to-day operations for IR, MDR, and our advanced services. We're going to talk about how Checkpoint is going to market with Infinity MDR and how it might fit into your day-to-day security needs. So as we've been preparing for launching MDR to our customers, it became very clear to us that everybody, especially during the time of COVID, has been struggling with resources. Most of IT admins are kind of fed up with how much work there is when it comes to supporting all of these remote users. And we're finding so many customers struggling with retaining resources, retaining the capabilities to be able to do the day-to-day security operations that they need to do. So over the last year, we've been building this service to provide you a complete solution to help you manage and maintain and detect and respond to all of your major threats. And we built this MDR solution. So as all of you are aware, the threat landscape is just getting worse, right? It is high velocity, high volume, and just keeps continually getting worse. The number of attacks that we're dealing with every single day is just logarithmically increasing. I'll give you a small example. Within our Checkpoint incident response team, we on average now are handling around 3,000 to 4,000 cases a year, and that's a lot. And those are the cases that are actually, producing significant loss and significant impact to customers' environments. And there are tens of thousands, if not millions more of these attacks are just continually hammering all of our customers. And to be able to deal with these threats is actually quite complicated because it requires so much to be able to actually handle these threats. It requires, a 24/7, 365 team that does nothing but respond and analyze these threats continuously. And we also need tools to be able to do this monitoring, like orchestrations and SIMs and XDRs and all of these other technologies to help us be able to get scale around these events. And we also know that if you don't have threat intelligence into this equation, the analysts can't do their jobs because they need to analyze these threats to see if they're risky or not. And getting all of that to work holistically is exceedingly difficult, right? Because you need to plug in all of these products, get all of the data feeds working, get the threat intelligence mapped, make sure that you have APIs to integrate absolutely everything. And the amount of effort it takes to do this is actually pretty astronomical to get it right. And then you have all of those efficiencies things on top of this, right? So even just your security operations requires a huge amount of focus, but you also then have your day-to-day security job that you have, like architecting the environment or having a cloud migration strategy and making sure that it's secure, or all the other day-to-day operation things that you have. So most corporations are actually struggling with just the basics. But there is an alternative to this. There is a different way that you can approach this problem. And that is to utilize an external service like Infinity MDR to be able to bring the expertise, the technical capabilities, and the coverage that you would need to be able to deal with these threats. And that's what we've built, is a service that allows you to subscribe to that takes away a lot of the pain for the day-to-day security operations of your environment. And it's really composed of four main pillars: people, technology, the coverage across all of the different product sets and domains, and making sure that we have a total cost of ownership that is less than what a customer could actually do for themselves. And that was sort of the design goal for our Infinity MDR. And this is what we're launching. So let's talk about a couple of these pillars on what makes a good MDR. First are the people. We spent a lot of time looking at how we should deliver these services to our customers, because we learned that most of our customers actually don't really care what our technology stack looks like on the back end, but they really cared what it was like to operate and interface with the analysts that are doing the day-to-day work, because that's where the relationships get built. And what we have built is basically three main pillars to our service. The central pillar is obviously the analysts that are doing the day-to-day analysis on all the threats that are actually occurring. And our frontier analysts are all highly trained, have had years of experience on responding to cyber threats. They know how to operate security operations centers at scale. They're skilled at hunting, and they have language expertise globally. And the key thing here is that we are making sure that we have way more analysts than interactions, and we're oversubscribing the number of analysts inside of the MDR. So we're making sure that the customer to analyst ratio is very low. So that way we get very good interactions with our customers, and a high value between that interaction between the customer and the analyst. But we didn't stop there. We also included our checkpoint incident response team. So our tier 3 of our MDR analyst team is actually our incident response team, the same team that's responding to the thousands of alerts globally every year. And the reason we did this is that the IR team has intimate knowledge on how to actually defend a network against an attacker that's inside of a network. And it gives us that insight on how to move faster and how to make the investigation cycle much more focused, and giving us the ability to have that high-end incident response capability built in directly with the MDR. We also have access to our CPR team. The CPR team is specifically our research arm inside of Checkpoint that provide additional capabilities within our products, and also look for vulnerabilities and interfacing with the attackers. This gives us a lot of knowledge around how to make environments better. And we take this knowledge from all of these organizations to build a holistic team that can actually respond to literally any kind of threat that you can imagine, from commodity ransomware to all the way to nation state actors infiltrating large networks. So having all of that expertise under one roof is extremely important. Most MDRs do not have as much of a skill in the response side or the research side as the Checkpoint Infinity MDR does. One other thing is it's 100% insourced, so there are no outsourced contractors for this, so everyone is a Checkpoint employee. And we also can have regionalized experts if needed within geographic needs. Now, it's not just people, but we also do need to have technologies and capabilities to be able to monitor, detect, investigate, hunt, and respond to attacks immediately by utilizing both threat intelligence and additional AI and correlation engines to be able to get scale. So within our MDR, we have many different components, but we have orchestration, we have automation, we have threat intelligence enrichment, we have correlation, timeline analysis. We have all of these technical bits to make the lives of our analysts easier to be able to identify these threats faster and respond to them immediately. But then we also have automation to be able to get scale across our customer base. But as we're developing the solution, we also needed to make sure that we had all of the domains covered. So network, endpoint, email, cloud, IoT, mobile are all areas that we're looking in within the Checkpoint ecosystem and outside of the Checkpoint ecosystem. So the Checkpoint MDR will be supporting third-party technologies in Q1 of next year. This is really important because now you don't have to be subscribing to every single Checkpoint product, but we will be able to interface with things like Microsoft Defender, Microsoft Sentinel, O365, things like that. but we're also integrating with Okta and Duo and SentinelOne and CrowdStrike and all of the other primary players in each one of the verticals or domains that we're looking at. Again, we want to be able to create an ability to be able to help you manage threats across any product type and any network type. And the way we do that is we have a very clear process on how we monitor, detect, investigate, respond, hunt, and prevent. This is our life cycle for all cases that we work inside of the MDR. We monitor every single one of the products to look for alerts that might be triggered. We take those detections and enrich them and investigate them fully. We cross-reference them across multiple product types, and we put together a full timeline analysis with threat landscape analysis, an intel analysis, and all of that becomes a case which analysts and the system can create responses, and we can also hunt within all of that infrastructure. And then we can also provide customers with preventions. So one of the things we wanted to do differently within our MDR was we have the ability to respond to any of the threats, including quarantining a host, isolating an email, taking those proactive actions inside of your environment to actually stop a threat immediately. But we also want to take the prevention a little further by giving you recommendations and how to actually make your infrastructure better to be able to defend your network against another threat, a similar threat than what we've been working on. This is important because we want to continually enhance the security profile of your network and give you more and more capabilities to ensure that all of your security controls are working the way you need them to be. What's really cool about this whole architecture is that it's very holistic, and it allows us to be able to hunt for indicators and TTPs and to respond to things that aren't just alert driven, but are also hunt driven. We'll talk a little bit more about hunting in a minute. Now, the way we do this is pretty cool. We utilize APIs. We're a very API first organization. What that means is that we interface with all of the products that you subscribe to utilizing APIs. So if you're a cloud subscriber to anything that creates a log, we can ingest those security logs and analyze them. And the way we do that is we look through the billions and billions of logs that you might have across all of these product types. And we're looking for alerts and events and TTPs and signatures and all the things that you need to look through all of these logs around. And then we do things like event correlation and timeline analysis. We also take your topology into consideration as we're filtering through these logs and creating these suspicious events. So now we understand what your network looks like and who your users are and what are their normal patterns. And we take all of that information and we distill that down to real events. Now, real events in our definition are things that we need to act on immediately or things that we need to act on soon to make sure it doesn't impact us or it's an incident. Any of those, tens of alerts that are being filtered to the top are things that we're interfacing with the customer around. And here is where things get a little bit different. We're actually interfacing with the customer in many different ways, but the output of our work will be very specific and we will give you very meaningful information before we ever call you. We want to be able to give you the who, what, where, when, why, and how the moment the event occurs. So we're doing the full in-depth investigation. We provide all of the information before we contact you, so we're not wasting your time. And when we contact you, we're going to give you the immediate ask. The immediate ask is, hey, customer, we saw a threat. It's in your network. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it's doing. We need to remediate immediately. And remediation can take many different forms, like isolating a host, enable a prevention, or quarantine an email. There are hundreds of different remediation actions that we can perform. But the point is that we want to take immediate action to stop this threat. And that's our goal when we contact you. We're also going to give you another very important piece of information, and that is recommendations on how to make the infrastructure better. These recommendations are there to enhance the security of your environment, based on the knowledge of the event that we're having right this second. So a recommendation could be something like enable a protection, or turn on a feature within Active Directory, or disable macros, or add additional security controls around your email system. But they're very holistic, and the idea behind these recommendations is that you can enhance your security controls by implementing these recommendations in your environment. So these two outputs, or inputs, depending on how you look at it, are really the core element of the service. Stop the attack, make sure that we can stop it in the future, and here are the lessons that we've learned, and we will continually reinforce that over and over and over again when we have incidents that we bring to our customers' attention. All of this basically formulates a whole life cycle around incident management. And we take all the lessons that we've gotten from all of our incident response cases and apply them into day-to-day monitoring. And what we're doing here is shortening the dwell time, the life cycle of these attacks to such a degree where there's not a lot of impact. For example, we had a customer just recently where we were monitoring their infrastructure. They had a web server in a DMZ zone. There was a 0-day on the web server, which the customer was unaware of. We were able to detect an attacker exploiting a vulnerability in the web server. And as they were executing that vulnerability, they dropped a binary called Mimikatz. And Mimikatz is used to steal credentials. Our system was able to pick up very quickly that the Mimikatz was executed and attempted to run. Our endpoint product actually stopped it. But if we would have just allowed the endpoint to actually just block the Mimikatz, that's not enough, because the vulnerability still exists and the attacker would just have to modify their approach to attack the web server, and they could still most likely, compromise that web server. So we saw that Mimikatz, we identified very quickly how it entered the system. We saw all the commands the attacker was executing. We contacted the customer within 5 minutes of identifying the Mimikatz. We were able to quarantine that host with one command very quickly. We stopped the attacker from doing any other additional damage to the infrastructure. In that time period, we also identified additional security controls that the customer could put on the perimeter, and we gave the customer the patches and the required upgrades that they would need to do on the web server to make sure that they weren't vulnerable to that attack. And that all happened in like a 15 to 30 minute window of being able to identify the attack, stop the attack, remediate the host, and bring it back up into production very, very quickly. So the key here is to be able to close that entire life cycle of investigation as quickly as humanly possible, to limit the amount of damage that occurs, learn the lessons of those events, and implement them as quickly as humanly possible. And now we're doing this for our MDR customers for the last year, and we're seeing an amazing return on investment because the number of incidents, things that are actually causing significant damage, are almost zero. We see a lot of incidents that could lead to additional loss, but we're stopping them and mitigating them and remediating them so quickly that the damage that is actually occurring is almost minuscule. It makes a huge difference. Now, for us, we don't just rely on the alerts from all of the products that we're ingesting, but we're also proactively hunting inside of customers' environments to look for additional threats. Attackers these days are very, very smart, and they're able to take a lot of the lessons learned from all of the products that are out there and look for ways to work around all of the security products and security controls a customer might deploy. So what we're doing is now proactively looking for, those gray area things like, hey, is someone executing the who am I command, or is someone, executing encoded PowerShells, or has someone elevated their privileges, or is there lateral movement or signs of lateral movement inside the environment? And that's threat hunting, is looking for TTPs, looking for indicators, looking for behavioral things, and continually asking the question, is the attacker in my network already? And what theories do I have to back up that they might be here? And we have these proactive hunts that we continuously execute inside of all the data sets that we have API access to, and continue to look for patterns. And those patterns start, percolating up, and they might generate leads that allows the analyst to be able to dive in to see if there's something else going on in the environment. So we're doing intelligence-led hunts, behavioral hunts, and privileged access hunts across the environment continuously. And one of the cool features of the service is that if you would like to have a hunter perform a hunt for you, at any moment you can go into the portal and request access to a hunt, and the hunting team will engage with you to look for any theory that you might have, or you might have a question about some of the data that's in your network, and we can provide those hunting capabilities to you. Now, all of this is really trying to drive for a prevention first strategy. We're going to bring all of these hunts, the alerts that we're bringing, and continually giving you security measures and best practices to your environment to make sure that you have the ability to protect against the threats that we are actually seeing in the wild, not just in your environment, but all environments across all of our customers. So we're continuously making recommendations both at the system level, the application level, even cloud-based recommendations. I'll give you an example of one where we made a recommendation to a customer recently. We've been seeing a lot of compromises in O365. And there's a number of ways these compromises work, but one of them is using multi-factor authentication and being able to spoof multi-factor authentication requests or stealing tokens and so on and so forth. So we actually observe these attacks globally around the world, and we're actually proactively reaching out to all of our MDR customers and making those recommendations to increase their security. So for example, maybe decreasing their token lifespan, or making sure that you've got travel restriction capabilities within the product, or making sure that your multi-factor is actually true multi-factor and not just a text message someone sent, and things like that. But those proactive recommendations continually come in, and we look at your environment to see where we need to add additional controls. Now, all of this is really designed to give you the full breadth of capabilities in a very simple deployment mechanism. We utilize API first as our strategy to onboard technologies, and we're onboarding many different types of technologies all the time. So I'm going to take a minute, get a drink. Any questions so far, Ryan? Anybody else out there have any questions?
Yeah, so no questions so far. A couple things, from the last session that we could probably bring up. From a business perspective, obviously, your Checkpoint sales team, will actually do any sales quoting with official quotes, discounts that apply. But basically, the way it works from a pricing standpoint is it's based on the number of users, and list price is $150 per user. The other big questions that we typically get are integrations, which Dan has kind of gone through. Everything's API based. We do have a list, but if there's any target lists, any questions that came up, I gave my contact information in the chat. I know there was one question around not being able to copy and paste that, but feel free to just send me an email. My email's in there, and I'll respond to you quickly. And then, if we need to have a conversation after, more than happy to have that chat. So that said, Dan, you want to add anything to that? There were really no questions here.
Yeah, okay. Well, as we're going along, folks, if you have any other questions, just please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, wherever you'd like. But I think for me, and sort of the message we're trying to get across is that we really want to be able to bring the coverage for monitoring across any type of technology. So today we're launching across the entire Checkpoint ecosystem. So that includes everything from cloud provisioned services and products, but we're also have the ability to do on-prem checkpoint management. That's incorporated into the system, and a lot of the other older systems. As long as there's an API, we can integrate with it. Now, obviously, the API has varying levels of capabilities and strengths and so on and so forth. But the point is that at least for alert ingestion and data ingestion and threat hunting, it's really trivial to be able to add additional technologies. So to kind of give you a taste of what we're working on right now, so Microsoft Defender is one of the big integrations that we're working on. Microsoft Sentinel, O365, Active Directory. These are all things that we're going to be incorporating. And like I said earlier, Sentinel-1, CrowdStrike, Okta Duo, pretty much anything that has an API is something that we can work with, if you will. The other cool thing about all of this is that everything we do is very transparent. So we'll show you in a minute, the overview screen of the portal, and we have a full life cycle for every single action that we do, and you can review all of the enrichments and the investigation cycles and all of the intel that we might get around all of the events that we handled. But I think for most customers, the biggest value is actually the TCO. And what we're finding is most customers are truly struggling with being able to retain the people, retain the technology, being able to deploy the technology effectively, and to be able to actually get a full monitored 24/7 capability across all the products that they have. For example, we've worked with a number of customers, especially even medium size, under say 25,000 users, and we see a lot of those customers buy 5, 10, 20 different security products, and what we find is that none of them are implemented correctly. And again, you can have varying degrees of definition of what correctly means, but what we find in most of them is there's at least 2 or 3 mistakes or omissions, or maybe even decisions that they've made that actually has a cascading effect on their security controls. So as we've been deploying MDR to the early customers, we found a common theme. One of the common themes is that customers put all the protections, the threat preventions, in detect only. A lot of that's actually historical because they'll put it in detect only and they'll say, okay, I promise I'll move to prevent at some point, but they never get to it. Well, this is a huge problem because the number of attacks that are actually successful because it's in a detect mode is actually pretty significant. So just by moving detection to prevention, for example, we can cut a significant number of incidents down. But again, a lot of customers are concerned about doing that because of operational impact and making sure that there isn't an outage. So we'll work with customers to actually help tune the configurations and deploy them in such a way that there isn't an outage, there isn't a major issue with deploying additional security controls. And we also know this is really complicated, right? It's not like you just click a button and everything just takes care of itself. That's not how this works. So we are actually working with our customers to actually start mapping all of your security controls and infrastructure to the Common Security Framework, NIST framework, and the ISO framework. So you can start seeing where and how the actual security controls are working, how effective they are, how ineffective they are, and measure the usefulness and the capability of the products that you have or the technologies you've enabled. A great example is this. We have a lot of customers that are just using E3 and E5 of O365, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you do have to understand that utilizing those technologies, there's a trade-off. On one side, the cost benefit is actually pretty compelling, right? It's cheap. But the reality is, from a security control perspective, it doesn't have enough to be able to cover the spread of the attacks that we're seeing. So with E5, for example, we've done a couple of calculations, and we see this in live data with MDR is we still see about 20-30% of all phishing emails still getting through. Now, 20-30% of phishing is actually a pretty big number. Now, there are ways to compensate for that, but you have to turn on additional capabilities on E5, or you might need to consider additional security controls to be able to augment the differential between what you're actually protecting against and the capability of the technology. And what we're going to start doing is measuring the actual effectiveness of the security controls based on the events that we're seeing within the organization. And that helps sort of stabilize and allows you to focus on where your greatest risks are. Are they in email? Are they on endpoint? Are they on the perimeter? Are they actually in cloud? Are they in SaaS applications? And that calculation is going to be really compelling. And we're going to have that available in Q1, where you'll actually have an executive dashboard to be able to see where the effectiveness of the controls are based on the events that we're seeing in real time, the configuration that's actually deployed, and we'll bring all of that in to give you an understanding of how effective the security controls actually are. In the US government, it's called continuous monitoring, but we're bringing sort of that kind of methodology into the MDR. And we're really excited about that for early next year. But that helps with the entire TCO conversation, because if you have all of those capabilities, now you can start measuring and understanding how effective all of these controls really are, and understanding that maybe staffing isn't the way to actually solve some of these problems. Maybe it's actually, tuning what you already have. Ryan, did we see a question pop in, or is it just my imagination?
I think that's just your imagination, Dan.
Ah, dang. My little studio lights that are here must be blinding me to death, so I can't. I thought I saw one pop in.
I'll turn on my camera though. Maybe that'll help make people ask questions.
Well, should we give something away for free? Should we do that? See what happens.
People always like that.
Should we do a bottle of bourbon? Say maybe. I have one from another webinar. If somebody would like one. How about this?
I think that's a great idea.
Would anyone like some free booze for a question? Going once, going twice. I guess not. Oh well, no one's listening. It's all good. So let's talk about how we're going to actually make this more transparent to you too. So everything I've kind of described is cool, but what we really want to do is also relay all of this information back to you in real time. So we actually have a customer portal that's available to all the MDR customers that gives you an overview of what's actually going on your network. How many logs we're looking at, how many alerts are we actually processing, how many cases we're opening, and how many of these cases are important enough to bring to your attention, and how many of these important cases are actually true incidents. The funny thing is most of our customers, we see maybe 1 or 2 incidents a week. Those incidents obviously have different levels, right? They could be severe, like they're data exfil and full compromise, all the way to a low-level incident that could turn into a major one if we don't act on it immediately. So we have varying degrees, and we display all of the metrics around case severity and how many alerts by product and things like that. But we also provide all of the recommendations and remediations, and we also have a full reporting mechanism, so we can generate all these reports for you to show the value of the service over time. Within the case view, you have all of the core metrics of the who, what, where, when, why. You also have the MITRE ATT&CK framework and threat intelligence and an alert overview for all the logs that we've analyzed within the case. All of this provides an understanding of what we're doing and how we're doing it. But once again, we're only bringing the things that are really the most important to you. Those things that we need to work together immediately to be able to respond. Everything else we're taking care of for you. You don't have to deal with. And lastly, we really want to create a different paradigm of interaction with our customers. So this allows us to be able to, use email and phone calls sort of in the traditional model, but we're also bringing in chat. So we actually have chat at the case level to be able to interface with analysts 24/7 to be able to work with the analysts. But we're also bringing access to Slack and Teams. Again, what we're trying to do is break down the barriers between the customer and the analyst, and we really want to create an open dialogue between both parties to be able to investigate these threats in real time and respond to them as quickly as humanly possible. So whatever method you like to work in, we're going to try to support to ensure that we can do a frictionless interaction between the folks on our side that are on the front line dealing with the threats and your team that is also responding to these threats, and we work together holistically. But that also includes our incident response analysts. So if we have an incident, they will also join the discussion, and you now have a team of tens of people working on your behalf to be able to deal with the threats that we're seeing. So if we have something major, there is no delay in being able to respond. It is absolutely immediate. We're typically responding to incidents within 5 minutes or major cases within 5 minutes, and we're always trying to decrease that time. And that means from identification of the first alert, or data from our threat hunting that leads to investigation and a response and a remediation, and being able to bring all of that to you within a 5-10 minute interval to be able to stop this threat in its track. So we do want to bring in a new way of working. And lastly, the architecture is pretty straightforward. APIs, APIs, APIs. So as long as your product has an API, we can interface with it. We are supporting all of the Checkpoint ecosystem and other vendors throughout this year and next year. We anticipate having about 50 to 75 additional vendors inside of the ecosystem by Q2 of next year, and we'll be adding more and more. So if there are any that you would like us to add, please feel free to ask. We're always looking at additional products to be able to bring in. At the center of the ecosystem is the MDR platform. The nice thing about the platform is it's global in nature. So we do have infrastructure in the United States, Europe, and APAC. It also has an open component to it, so you can interface with it through a portal, but we also are going to offer an API. And for our partner community, we've actually created the system to be able to be utilized by partners in a co-sell or in a white labeled or co-managed sort of infrastructure. And if you are a partner and interested in this, reach out to Ryan and myself, and we can go into deeper detail around how all of that would work. But the cool thing about all of this is that we really want to be able to bring the power of the Checkpoint operations teams, the power of your operations teams, bring them together in such a way where you don't have to deal with the heavy lift and only are dealing with the things that are the most important to your security in your environment. So in summary, 24/7 industry top team. We have all of the tools to be able to leverage both threat intelligence and all of the cool engines to be able to create an understanding of the threats. Got an intuitive web portal that allows you to be able to very quickly and look at all of the actions that we're doing. Very simple integration. Most of the time we integrate it into a new product within about 5-10 minutes. It's extremely fast. And it's a single infrastructure across all of the domains that we've talked about. And at the end of the day, gives you better efficiencies about total cost of ownership and giving you that operational peace of mind around the threats that everyone is seeing. So there we go, folks. We're a little early, but let's see if anybody took us up for that bottle of bourbon.
Yeah, so we had one more comment from Daniel. Just that he gets it. It's a very good presentation, but that it's very comprehensive, right? So it covers a lot of things, which I get. And typically, one of the comments I made there was, we do see a number of different things that come up, right? Whether it's, let's say integrations, whether it's, typically between all the different detection response services that are out there and kind of what we see, because I think, Dan, that's probably the biggest question we get. With all the different things out there, what are the differentiators, right? Things like that. And I think that's, probably my best answer to that comment. Yeah.
So there's another question about Sophos. Jesse, I think you asked that. Yes, Sophos, Trend Micro are definitely on our list to incorporate into the platform. I think a general rule of thumb is on the EDR side, we're looking for next generation EDRs. We're not going to bother with sort of the legacy AV providers. You must be a next generation capability. And endpoint actually plays it's a very important role in this architecture. What we're finding is endpoint is a great component to be able to put together the story very, very quickly. We recommend most customers actually consider 3 technologies at minimum to be able to bring into the MDR. We can work with 1 or 2, but 3 is really the trifecta. The first one is endpoint, and specifically next generation EDR or EDR that has recording capabilities that basically can record all the actions on the network or the endpoint. The second technology is email, some sort of email capability. So either O365 or something like our Harmony email component. Very much a critical part of this architecture. We're also thinking about and working with Proofpoint and Mimecast to bring that data into this platform too. And then the third component that's equally important is network. We still see network-based attacks every single day. We can't ignore that data stream, so and it's actually quite valuable. So those three, if you can do email, endpoint, and network, you really have a huge amount of coverage. Now, if you're a very cloud-heavy organization, have a lot of cloud infrastructure, then obviously CloudGuard and all of the cloud security components that are available in, say, AWS or Azure or GCP, those are also things that we're going to work on integrating. So GuardDuty is one of them, and there's a whole suite. I mean, there's thousands of these individual point solutions around security, around cloud, but the idea is that we'll incorporate every one of those into the MDR. Excellent. Any other questions out there? Well, if there are no more questions, I know I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I'm going to give you guys two contact points of contact. We've got Ryan Burkhardt, who's on the call here for the Americas, and we have Leon Owen, who is our point of contact for EMEA and APAC. If you have any questions, if you have any follow-up, you can definitely reach out to your Checkpoint representative or reach out to Ryan or Leon, and we'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions. We can do a full demo of the platform for you, and we can discuss, any further direction you'd like to take. Also, we have a website where there's a solution brief, and we can make this presentation available to everyone who joined. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. If there are no other further questions, I think we'll conclude a little bit early.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Take care, everybody. Be safe out there.